sound machine that's next to you.
Okay. Okay. So we are going to kind of chat a little bit. I'm going to start with the book, and our opinion of the book. So my first question was, and I have not had personal experience with this. So I was very curious to see if either of y'all have had experience with same-sex families in your classroom, because a lot of that book discusses same-sex families and how to go about that and different literature that you can use. But I've actually never run into that with my students. So I haven't had to go that route with them, but I was just wondering if you guys had had any students in your class that had had same-sex families.
My very first year, in fifth grade, I had a little girl who had two moms. And it was very much, you could tell that they were very comfortable, like having the conversation because and I'm not the person to feel, you know, like judgmental or whatever, like it's
Yeah.
very much like everybody needs to do what is comfortable for, like do what you want, like express yourself, don't hide yourself, so I'm just
Hmm.
very much that way. And they were very much that way. The student that I had really did enjoy reading.
Hmm.
And honestly, our school library, so this was back in, I think, 2016, 2017. And our library has a lot of books. I don't know if they still have them because of everything that goes on. But they definitely had a lot of books that had families that had same-sex parents. And so I could point her in that direction. And our librarian is phenomenal. And she was able to like find her some, like she would go to her and like ask about them, being
Hmm.
in fifth grade and being able to advocate for herself. I'm not sure, as she's now in 10th or 11th grade now. I don't know what her experience has been now. I'd be curious to see how
Yeah.
she is doing now. But in fifth grade, like none of the kids ever gave her a hard time, which I do again think that comes from like being in East Cobb, as far as
Right.
like, yes, she was an outlier because we don't see a lot of that in East Cobb, but she was also the kids really didn't have anything to, like, they weren't, not that I ever heard of them like being mean to her about it, and she was very open about it, which I was proud of her for.
Did you ever have her, like her moms came into your classroom and did stuff together?
Well, they didn't come in to like do any like volunteering or
Okay.
anything, but I did meet both of them at different conferences and end of the year. At the end of the year when we do our fifth grade walk, the
Hmm.
parents walk them, they both were there for that. So I think that, like I said, she openly talked about it. And then she was there in front of the kids at the very end of the year. So they all knew.
Okay.
Um I was just proud of her for not ever being like ashamed of it.
Yeah.
Hmm. 'Cause I'm sure
And
others aren't that fortunate.
Right.
at our school currently, we have like several families that are same-sex couples. Um, and I have heard of situations where kids will say things like that's weird or two moms can't be married. And
Hmm.
the kid usually was like, well, yeah, they can because my moms are married. Or
Right.
in Asheville, it was very, very common and not at all unusual. Like there were, multiple couples at every grade level, even within the same class. So it was very just like I guess more normalized in the culture there than it is here.
Why do you think that was?
Asheville is kind of just like a super liberal town,
Okay.
and a lot of same-sex couples intentionally choose to live there because it's more liberal and because it's easier to find like community,
Hmm.
and have like other families to be around. So I think that's one reason.
Okay.
One thing that I thought, well, as I was reading through this, I started to think about the old assistant principal that we had at our school. He's been gone for a couple of years now, but it was so funny that because his email address was Steven,
Hmm.
and then we all called him Joel. And we would ask him, why he was, and he his husband, they adopted a child and they had a son, and he came to our school while they were here. But he would always say that like he didn't want the parents to find him on Facebook under Joel, which they will anyways, like
Right.
they'll figure it out, but he thought he could keep his identity, and he wanted to keep his identity with like the families separate, meaning like seeing him as Steven instead of
Mhm.
Joel, which I thought was very interesting just
Hmm.
because, I just hate it. I hate that people have to feel like they need to hide behind anything, or, whether it's the kid or them. Like, I just hate that people have to hide behind stuff that they're like ashamed of, that they shouldn't have to be ashamed of. It just makes me sad.
So did he tell all the parents he had a different name?
No, well, his email was his first name, which was Steven, dot his
Okay.
last name, and then but his middle name was Joel, and that's what he went by all his friends, and all of us at our job knew him as Joel. And somebody had asked him why he did that, and he just said he didn't necessarily want parents to go and like think of him any
Mhm.
differently because he was married to a man. Um,
Wow.
which, it's just sad. It really is.
That
Really
is really
sad.
sad.
So,
So I have a question about you guys. In respect to the controversy we've dealt with so much lately in Cobb with all the books that we're able to read and whatnot, how would you feel exploring, like, let's say you have a child that comes into your classroom and their moms or their dads and there are kids that are handling that not correctly, and you feel like you need to go to literacy or you want to show something. How would you feel now because of what we've been going through, actually presenting a book that had to do with that topic?
I have to say, like, it's made me worried to on purpose bring up a topic that I know might be controversial.
Mm-hmm.
Which it's doubly sad because I don't feel that this topic should be controversial. Like, I personally don't understand why in 2024 this is still controversial.
Yes.
But for some people it is. Like, I have had kids in my class make homophobic comments this year, which is actually the first time I've heard it recently. And it's not, it's just what they hear, it's what they've been taught.
Right.
And I have like even been more careful about like what shows I let them watch for indoor recess or during dismissal, because in Pete the Cat, the show, Sally Squirrel has two dads, and
Mm-hmm.
I never thought anything of it, but a little boy in my class was like, ew, gross. And now I feel like I can't show that, because the last thing I need for him is to go home and tell his parents, and then I get a nasty email about it, and then it's like everything has to be so, you know, free of controversy now.
Right.
So I'm like, I feel very frustrated by it, because that's not even in books, like
Right.
just an Amazon Prime show that I feel is totally appropriate for children. But yeah, I would say like I used to try to bring in things to help my class have discussions and to help them think about other people's feelings. And I just don't feel comfortable doing that anymore, really, like as of this year.
So before this year and all that went down, you had a different, like, do you think you would have felt comfortable?
Yeah, I used to read like I and Oliver Button is a sissy, as again,
Right.
it shouldn't really be controversial, but a couple of years ago my class had a really good discussion about it. And this was 2 years ago, because these kids are currently third graders. And
Mm-hmm.
and I remember this little girl raised her hand and she was like, it's really sad that his parents want him to do more boy activities, because um your parents should love you for who you are and support you no matter what, which I thought was really profound for a first
Mm-hmm.
grader to say, and was different than the conversations that kids are having about that book like 10 years ago when I first started reading it to my class, and they were just like, well, girls can do whatever they want and boys can do whatever they want. But like her taking it to that deeper level of your parents should support you and love you for who you are, I thought was really profound.
Yeah.
And this year, I don't feel comfortable reading that book.
So you're not going to read it this year.
Probably not.
Did you
It's
s- did you see that that was in the chapter?
I did. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I guess other people have thought that that
Because
book was controversial.
it talks about it on I like tagged it because I was like, oh my gosh, I remember Lucy saying that she read that,
Yeah.
and it was in there. It talks about designated for discussing homosexuality, and it does not imply that if a girl and boys veer away from stereotypical activities. So it's like talking about the peers may label them gay or lesbian.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's a book for little kids. It's not about sexuality at all. It's about
Right.
gender norms and breaking down
Stereotypes.
stereotypes. And
Mhm.
I mean, I think it was written in the 70s. Like it's a Tommy DePaulo book. It's not a new
Yes.
book. And
Yes.
I'm like, okay, stuff that was okay to talk about in the 70s and the 80s, like a lot of these books, like William Has a Doll, like
Mm-hmm.
those are old books too. I'm like, okay, I thought we got over this in the 70s, and here it is controversial again in 2024. And I'm like, are we ever going to progress past this, or is there just going to be a backlash to every, like, you know, societal progress that we achieve?
Right. I mean, I just feel like even if you felt like this is where you get, this is where it gets really frustrating because even if you go in your mind and you're thinking, okay, I feel that that's an appropriate book because, I know the implications of it and I know what it's, but you're still going into the process of thinking, this is my career, right?
Yeah.
So if I go into deciding that I'm just going to read this book, then you're risking your job to read a book. It's almost like you're just not allowed to teach that stuff. You teach exactly what's on paper and that's it, because then you can at least say, well, they vetted this and they said that's okay to do. But the minute that you go off of that without all those hoops to prove that you can do it, then you're risking your career.
Yeah, and it's crazy because 2 years ago I read it without hesitation. Like it didn't
Yeah.
even enter my mind, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't read this. But this year I don't plan to read it. And that's sad because this is like the
Hmm.
time of year when I feel like first graders, especially like a gifted cluster class, they can have like serious book talks, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And instead, now I'm like, characters, setting, problem, solution, like they get this stuff. There's not a lot there for them to dig into. So I feel like it is limiting.
And they handled like when you were reading the book in the past, they handled it like totally chill and like didn't, nobody ever questioned that.
No, and I never had a parent say anything about it ever. Like I've been reading it every year for like 10 years before.
Wow.
And never had a parent say anything, even though, because I mean it really is, it's about a little boy who doesn't like to play ball and he wants to dance.
Yeah.
And the other kids, the boys are mean to him.
Hmm.
Because I think while like a lot of topics haven't progressed, I do think that bullying is handled better now. So like I don't think in most cases that kids are allowed to like mercilessly taunt children for not wanting to play football or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And like I think most adults do step in those situations now where maybe they didn't 20 or 30 years ago.
Hmm.
But the actual like, should people do what they want to do even if it's different, and like
Yeah.
should we make fun of people for doing what's different? And
Well,
you
I mean,
know,
that's just going off what the book, the whole critical approach, like
yeah,
that's you're doing that, and then now it's just a shame that we can't, you know?
I know.
Yeah.
And of course there's other books that you can have that same conversation with. I'm thinking of like Spaghetti on a Hot Dog Bun.
Yeah.
It's a book that I don't enjoy as much as Oliver Button, I think. But it's the same kind of message. Like the kids are making fun of her because she puts spaghetti on a hot dog bun. And you can have
Hmm.
that same conversation, you know, should we
Hmm.
make fun of people because they're different? Should people have to hide who they are or what they like so that people will make fun of them? And yeah, we can still have that discussion. It
Yeah.
just is sad to me that like a book that I've read for a long time suddenly feels off limits.
Yeah. Do you feel like you were mentioning that the bullying, do you feel like your school handles those kinds of situations appropriately? Because I feel like there's so much of that, and it could be just because I have the fourth grader and I'm seeing what's to come with girls and boys, but I mean, they're using terms in fourth grade and they need a book like that because Like my daughter has a really, really good friend whose mom teaches at our school, and he's a boy, and he likes ninja stuff, like, ninja, like the CrossFit kind of stuff. But he does not do sports, and he likes to dance and do theater, and he will not do the talent show with them this year because the boys called him gay for doing the talent show with girls last year. So and it's haunting because they're all practicing for this talent show right now, and he's just so confused and so upset, and he constantly is feeling like he doesn't fit in. So I mean, I feel like there's this side of it that is so not even addressed because, maybe in the past, again, I'm not a fourth grade teacher, but in the past, you teach this concept, and you probably were doing a wonderful thing teaching this book to your kids, but now all these books that have this stigma behind them for whatever reason, and the fear of parents of their kids learning it. I mean, you can walk to the grocery store and see this.
Yeah.
Like, it's everywhere.
Everywhere.
Don't get your child's social media if you don't want them to see this. So it's just kind of like they're blocking them from what they don't want them to see, but they're okay letting them see things way too early, but they're not teaching them the reality of the world.
Yeah.
So it's just, I don't know. I think that while there's still a really good group of people that will stand up and kind of stop that, I think there's still people that are in their houses that are, telling their kids this is not okay and this is da 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 da, and then their kids are bringing it into the schools, and he's not gay, he just likes different things, and if he ends up being it, then he ends up being it, but it's just it's haunting the kid, and so it's just really hard to see because it's really sad, like he's crying every day.
Yeah, I mean, no child should feel like they no longer want to participate in an activity that they actually love and enjoy because
Mhm.
of what somebody else said to them.
Yeah,
And it's really tricky because at a certain level, you cannot micromanage what kids say to each other. And
right.
once it's said, it can't be taken back. And
Hmm.
like, kids don't understand how powerful words can be.
Yeah.
I had a weird thing happen with one of my students last week. My first graders sit next to fourth graders in the cafeteria. And um, a boy from the fourth grade class came over to one of my girls. And when I picked them up from lunch, she just told me that a fourth grader called her an idiot, which
Hmm.
I was like, okay, I'm gonna, message the teacher and see what's up with that. But I didn't know which kid it was yet. But then she was still upset about when she got home because her mom messaged me and said that actually the kid first asked her if she was Indian, which she is, and then called her an idiot, which to me was a lot more concerning because I was like, is he implying that like this is connected? Like, what is this kid doing coming up to one of my little sweet babies and hurting her feelings?
Hmm.
So I did end up figuring out which kid it was and talking to the teacher, and I thought she handled it really well because she brought him down to my classroom and had like a respectful conversation where he apologized. And it turns out I honestly don't really think that he was trying to say something hurtful or harmful. I think that he is just not a kid that has a lot of background knowledge or necessarily great role models. And I think he just didn't know what he was saying. And he said he didn't call her an idiot. It was just this whole weird thing. But the teacher was like, okay, this is a good chance for us to talk about I thought she handled it great. She was like, we can usually tell a person's race or ethnicity kind of by looking at them, but it's also not our business to just
Right.
like ask people about their race or ethnicity. That's kind of rude. And
Right.
you hurt this little girl's feelings, and whether you meant to or not, her feelings were hurt. And that made her feel worried and unsafe about going to lunch and being at a table next to you. So you need to apologize to her, and you need to also not talk to people that way in the future.
Hmm.
And, it was, one of those things I was like, I don't think anything like this has happened with my students before, but I appreciated that the teacher handled it really well. Because
Hmm.
I think some teachers would just be like, whatever, that's not a big deal,
Right.
and not talk about it with the student.
Hmm.
Um, Because I think like if you have a lot of behavior issues in your class and there's one thing after another and you feel like you're always putting out fires, then stuff like that does start to slide, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
But I think overall, like our school does do a good job of handling it, especially like, hurtful comments or inappropriate comments. I do think we like in the couple of years that I've been in my school, I see that it has gotten better. Like people take it more seriously. People are more willing to sit down and talk with kids about stuff like that and handle
Mhm.
it.
I wonder if some of it has to do with the fact that of what school dynamic you come from, because I know you come from a school that, yes, is East Cobb, but you still have more diversity than I think that you would see at like a Timber Ridge or, Kayla, I guess maybe a little bit at your school with Murdoch. Um, because we have not nearly as much. I mean, while it's getting more cultural and diverse, it wasn't that way until this House bill came into play.
We're we aren't, I wouldn't say we're extremely diverse, but I see a lot of the comments, and I think that I feel like my teammates, that my team, I just really enjoy them, and I feel like all of us handle um just the thing. When we come back every year, when we come back from winter break, we just really feel a change in the students, and for many reasons, but like they just start to be a lot more mean to each other and like come up with all this stuff that they've either heard from home or seen. And I have always like have been somebody who, when speaking to any student, child, whatever, even my 15-month-old, just really explaining, kind of like you were saying, that fourth grade teacher is a lot of what I do in my classroom, because most of what they're coming to school and the comments that they're saying and the things that they're talking about, they actually have no idea. Like I find more times than not, they have no idea what they're actually saying,
Mhm.
and they don't realize that somebody who, for instance, there was a situation the other week that in another classroom where a little boy was calling. He said he'd never met another black kid that didn't do him wrong. It's like, you're an 8-year-old. So when we were
Mhm.
talking to him, we were explaining that, we are like, what do you mean? And you could just tell by, he didn't really have anything to back it up with, but he had upset other children at their table that were African American. And so when we pulled him aside and we're talking to him, it's like, what do you mean? He was backpedaling. He was like, he didn't know what to say. And so you could tell like he definitely heard that somewhere. And then he was just almost like repeating it and saying it. And so it was just like, they're gonna pick up on so much, but when you actually explain to them, okay, well, let me tell you like how it is perceived, and showing them, like really explaining like how it's perceived to people now that they've said it, and now that somebody who has taken it and it's upset them, and showing them that like this actually hurt their feelings. So like
Mhm.
let's put ourselves in their shoes, and doing a lot of that, and it really shows them. And I think that that is almost the most powerful thing that like we can do, and especially third, fourth, and fifth grades, because they're so crucial. I feel like they go to middle school, like the habits that they've built in third, fourth, and fifth grade are like really do start to
Mhm.
stick with them a lot, just
Right.
because things get tougher. And so teaching them like how to think about things the best we can, and really like see the reason why behind what they're doing, instead of just getting onto them and giving them a punishment, but just showing them like how it can really affect someone, is extremely important. So that's a big thing that we see, or that we how we handle it as a
Y-
team.
Yeah. So when you're looking at books that your kids are reading, have you guys ever come into a situation where your child in your class checks out a book, where it might be offering more feminine, like, for example, a little boy in my class might check out like Fancy Nancy or Pinkalicious. Have you ever had a parent come back at you and be kind of like, well, why did you allow them to choose that book? Or like, I have a little boy who walks around and he carries a Princess water bottle, and he only checks out Princess books. I mean, he just everything pink. Um, and his parents are fine with it. But I've had in the past, actually, last year, a boy and his dad was like, we do not encourage him to read girl books.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, like, I mean, what do you say? Like, you're like,
Right.
okay, I mean, okay, well, most books have some kind of character that's a girl in it, but so I don't
Right.
really know what that means.
No,
But
what's a girl book? Does the book
yeah.
have genitalia? Like,
I was just like, I don't even know. I actually didn't even pay much. I just told the librarian and she kind of like steered him into, different titles. But, I just was curious if you guys have ever dealt with a parent kind of being upset with the fact that their child checked out a specific gender neutral book.
I
you
don't
know,
think that I've ever had a parent get mad.
Me neither.
I feel like a lot of my kids, and I don't know if this is because I'm in third grade either, because a lot there have been times where I've heard like my kindergarten teacher friends like say things more often, but almost feel like the third, fourth, and fifth grade, their child has been doing it or
Yeah.
they've stopped it, one or the other. But it's funny, like I feel like this year, the boys in my class, like they amongst each other, they have no problem. Like when we have a star student poster that somebody different takes home over the weekend and brings it back. There have been so many boys come back, and on the bottom it talks about like their favorite things, and so many of them have said that their favorite color is pink. And like
Oh.
one little boy has pink Nikes that he wears, like pink and like a dark or like a lightish red kind of color.
Mm-hmm.
And like they also are starting to check out the Babysitters Club, the graphic novels and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that is something that I haven't seen as much. Um, but this year, like, and the boys, like, as far as like that, and I'm like, if a parent has something to say, like, and they want to bring it to my attention, then we'll address that conversation. But I'm also in the back, like, yeah, you read what you want, like, like
Right.
until anything gets wrong, I'm like, yeah, read what you want. You do you, and if it interests you, and you're reading and growing your brain, stretching your brain, like you do whatever you want. It's kind of my thing, but
Yeah.
I have not had a parent challenge me
Okay.
I
that.
I think that like in that situation, um, my principal would back me up to shut it down real fast by being like, okay, if it's really important to you what book your child checks out, please go online, use Destiny, reserve the book, we'll make sure it's set aside. Like you pick the book, I'm not micromanaging the library book that your child chooses
Yeah.
because I don't know what's a girl book either.
Right.
Like, anything that has pink on it, anything that has a girl in it, like what's your criteria? So you can choose your own books and you can handle it if your child is disappointed that they don't get to pick out their own books.
And
Yeah.
one thing I think that too, I don't feel like it goes the other way. Like not nearly as much as it goes like boys checking out girly stuff. Like girls are allowed to be tomboys and like sports and do all of this stuff. And I have never really seen that be an issue or a problem or getting made fun of for it. It seems very one-sided, which is just a really big shame, I think. It's
Yeah.
like for those boys that like different things.
Right.
It doesn't, like, girls can go and play out in soccer with all the
Mhm.
other boys and they're cool, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that I feel like it's kind of always been that way.
I agree with that. Like, there's nothing that really, I mean, what is a girl gonna do that would look the same as a boy choosing to do dance? Like, there isn't really much. Like, there's even flag football. I think it's at Pope High School, right? Where they just like killed it and did like they won like state. So like I don't really see any comparison to what is a
What could be,
what is
right.
what could be the same equivalent to say a boy is going to excel in ballet. What would a girl do that a boy would do that would make her come across in that same mannerisms?
Yeah.
I think I have taught a little girl before that was very like gender non-conforming, and this was in the country in rural Virginia, and so it was not typical. at
Mhm.
all. And her parents told me that like as soon as she could talk, she started expressing a preference for
Mm.
boys' clothing and shoes, and
Mhm.
they were fine with that. She wanted her hair shorter. They kept bangs in like a really short bob. I think at that time they were okay with her being like what kind of girl she wanted to be, but hadn't really like explored the possibility of her not being a girl. I think
Okay.
that like I don't know if that had occurred to her yet, or if her parents were just like not making that an available option for her at that time. Cause this was also in like I'm gonna say that was in like 2012. So it's been a while. Like she's in college now. Um but um like she did not mind at all if other kids thought that she was a boy. But she would always just say like, yeah, like girls can do whatever they want to do and wear whatever they want to wear. Like not all girls are
Yeah.
the same. And I
Yeah.
thought that was awesome. Like it really was never an issue the entire year. She was just like a nice, easy to get along with kid, and none of the kids in my class ever like made any like negative remarks or said anything unkind about her.
That's
So,
awesome.
mhm.
So what did you guys think about like from the book front desk? Like I feel like there wasn't, I don't know, maybe this is my opinion, but I feel like when it came to the school setting, it seemed to be the fact that, there was diversity between like the characters, they both were Chinese. So I feel like the fact that they had that, there wasn't as much of the prejudice and the racism within the school as there was outside of it. I don't know if you guys kind of picked up on the same thing with as my thoughts on that. But I wanted to kind of see what you thought about how the schools seem to approach that in the book, and what that if your schools have specific racism and prejudice policies in place, because I don't remember. I know that we do the trainings and stuff through Cotton County, but I don't think I've actually ever had to deal with it within my school to see how like the school would handle that if it became an issue.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting how like to me, like as a teacher, my perception was that the teacher didn't handle things
Mm-hmm.
very well all the time. Just like um when Mia was on the math team with the
Mm-hmm.
two white girls, and they were like, yeah, we got the Chinese girl. Like if I
Yeah.
heard one of my students refer to another child as the Chinese girl,
Yeah.
I would be like, excuse me,
Right.
like, and of course, teachers don't hear everything. I just thought that overall there was not like a lot of conscious effort made on the teacher's
Right.
part to like help the kids navigate this tricky stuff. And probably, I know this book was very like autobiographical for the author. And when she was growing up, yeah, there probably wasn't a lot of
Yeah.
conscious help. Like she was just kind of thrown in there with the sharks and she had to figure it out. But I do think that like at least at our school, I feel like we do handle things like that a lot better, like more thoughtfully, more consciously thinking about like teaching the kids how to talk to and about other people respectfully.
Right. So have you dealt with that ever? Have you ever dealt with that in your classroom where they talk about that?
Not a lot. I mean, the kids in my class do have conversations about race and ethnicity because I do have a diverse group, and we do talk about that stuff sometimes. But honestly, like I think all of them must be having like really good conversations at home about this kind of stuff, because
Mm-hmm.
they're all like really respectful when they talk about race. And even when we like learn about, we did Dr. Martin Luther King is not a first grade standard, so we just briefly touched on it. But
Mm-hmm.
Ruby Bridges is one of our standards, and
Okay.
I always love teaching it. And the kids do. That's one thing we're like, all right, this is my standard.
Yeah.
And the kids are going to talk about it, and they have always had really thoughtful conversations, and it's interesting to hear what they say. But I think that is part of it. I think a lot of the parents at our school, they are really educated and really involved parents, and they're the type of parents that will sit down intentionally and have conversations with their kids about that kind of stuff. So
Right.
I think the kids have language and they have words to talk about it.
Right. What about you? Have you dealt with any of that, Kayla?
You know, again, I think it kind of goes back like, yes, the kids will say things, but I don't always know that they know what they're saying when they say it. I
Mhm.
have a little boy in my class this year who um has like one of the most interesting home lives that I've ever of anyone that I've ever taught. He is one of 10 siblings, and um this family had a nanny when their youngest was born, and she was telling them about how her brother was and his girlfriend were having another baby, but they were probably going to get them taken away because it was a bad situation. And so they ended up adopting the baby right as soon as he was born. Well, then my student um was also one of the 10 siblings of the same family. And so basically all 10 siblings were taken and put into different families and split up. Well, the one that was in my classroom, his where he was going to be placed fell through. And so his aunt, I guess his biological aunt, reached out and asked if they would also adopt him. And so they
Wow.
did. And he was just recently getting made fun of by another student, saying, you know, you don't even know who your parents are. What do you know? Like, it was just like heartbreaking. Um, and then he was saying things like, it's honestly, as I was reading, like, I've been very ahead, but it's honestly kind of makes me connect to the next book that we're reading, because
Yeah.
he was like saying how if I tell anyone, because we were like, did you tell anyone at ASP or anything? And he was like, no, if I tell, then they're just going to call me a snitch and I'm going to get made fun of even more. And so we've made like a very conscious effort to like just be very aware to make sure for him and all of them. But again, these students, like, they say stuff in the third grade and they don't know fully what they're saying. They might know partially, but they don't know fully what they're saying. And
Right.
so, like, I do think that I hear a lot of what they say. I always tell the kids that I hear you guys tell on each other constantly. So don't worry if you say something, I'm gonna find out. And so that kind of like keeps them into like not as much. But they do. I do hear different things, but I definitely wouldn't have handled it like the teacher by basically just being quiet, which hopefully she just didn't hear it and we can infer that she didn't hear it and not think that she just heard it and moved on, because I don't think
Right.
I'll ever be able to do that. So, oh, yes, yes and no.
Right. Have you ever dealt with a teacher being any type of racist in your career?
I have not, but I would think that I would have a really big problem if I did. Like, I don't think that I could be quiet because
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
I
This.
have heard teachers say things that they really shouldn't have said.
Mhm.
Maybe not like overtly racist, because I think that these same teachers like care about the kids and really do love their students and do a good job of teaching them and care about them. But I just don't think that, like, I just don't think it's okay to like comment on a child's hairstyle or their clothing, because that's not what they can control. That's what their parents control.
Right.
And it makes me very uncomfortable when teachers basically talk bad about children. Like, I've heard it before. Luckily, nobody on my team currently does that, because I do have a problem with it. I'm like, if you need to talk bad about 6-year-olds, then I think you should like look
Pick up
into
a
some
hobby.
hobbies for yourself.
Yeah.
It tends to like, I don't want to, exhibit ageism myself, but it tends to usually be older teachers. Better
Mhm.
watch me, because I'm going to be like, I'm one of the older teachers now. We have a lot of really young teachers at our school. Um, but yeah, I haven't really heard anybody say anything terrible, but you know, I just think it's so important to watch how we talk about kids.
Yeah. I've heard it several
Yeah.
times. I mean, it's been even, it's gotten to the point where it's been reported to county, and I was one of them. So it's just, it's a very difficult thing because I think people like to speak before they have the knowledge of the background of what people have been through. And until you're in somebody else's shoes, you have no clue what they've gone through. So it's very quick to judge, like if a child comes in with shoe sizes 2 times too big, or the outfit that they wore the day before, and different, disrespectful comments are made. It's very hard. It's a very hard pill to swallow. And it really makes it makes it really uncomfortable in the workplace, and it makes it, the tension is high because I don't feel like the county necessarily jumps too quickly. It's her word against their word, it's he said, she said, and the proof is not there because it's a conversation. And so, I haven't been exceptionally pleased with how they've handled situations. So, I mean, I don't know. We're still in the process of trying to figure out what happens to this situation. It happened this year. But it's been very daunting on a lot of us at our school because it was multiple comments that multiple teachers heard, and was reported, and nothing has been done.
Wow.
Mhm.
I feel like that would not fly at my school. Like,
Well, Tamika's a very, Tamika is like, she's wonderful.
she's a really good leader.
Yeah,
Like, she's
she
not
is.
just good at, like, she's not just nice. Like,
Yeah,
she is a good leader. And
she
that's like a
is.
whole different level, you
Yeah,
know?
she is. And she was great when she was at Timber Ridge.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think that, and it's one of those things that you're kind of like, okay, has do I think that my principal has gone the steps that the county has told her to go? Yeah, I mean, she did all the things that she was required to do. Um, but it's very hard to watch the person continue to be around children when you know what has been said. And you're just kind of always like waiting for the next thing. And and even stepping up and saying, absolutely not, that's very disrespectful. Like, do not say that stuff around, like, or do not speak about that around me. But then you're like, okay, well, who's the next person they're going to speak it to that's going to just turn the ear? So it's definitely been, I've had some, like you were saying, Lucy, some of those comments in the past where you hear things and you're like, okay, like that was not cool.
Yeah.
But this has become a whole nother level of crazy that I just wish something would have been done more, because they are 5 and 6 year olds, and they have no control over what their life is like at this point. And so it's heartbreaking to know that things are being said that are so disrespectful. And again, you don't know what they've been through to be at this point. So, it's been a daunting situation that I just have been very unpleased with. And there's not much that I really complain about, but it's been a really hard situation at our school. So it was real crazy reading this because I was like, wow, and then hearing all that the teacher didn't do in that book to help Mia. And I was like, wow, I'm kind of living through that at the moment, um, with what I hear. So just wondered if y'all had any of that in your schools.
I did really like the book. I think that I think I liked Words on Fire better, but I think that Words on Fire is written for a older audience. And when I think about the audience that Front Desk could be written for and that kids could relate to, I think that thinking about the whole premise of children seeing themselves in a book, this one could give I think some perspective to a lot of different types of children, not only someone who would identify with her being a girl or her being of a minority or something like that. But I think that even someone being able to relate to having someone like Hank in your life.
Mhm.
Like he was such a great character and I really, really enjoyed him, like everything that he did. And it was like at first he started out such a small, like he just stayed there. He was one of the weeklies, but then like the
Mhm.
things that he did and the things that he went out of his way to do, and the things that honestly, like that even Mia did to go out of her way that she didn't have to do. And then he like reciprocating it and like them just being able to relate to like just more than just her in the story. I
Mhm.
also think that there's a lot of people that could relate um to, of course I just drew a blank on his name. The son of
Oh, Jason.
Jason.
Jason. I think a lot of people could relate to
Jerky
Jason too
Jason.
Well,
because
and
he
some of it was his out of his control. He's
right,
being raised by a dad who is a complete jerk,
yeah,
and
he sees what he's how he's treating
yeah.
people.
And he's
But
too young to be like, I mean, he's getting to the point where he can make his voice known, but he's so young still that
yeah.
that's that difficulty of like, how do I step in and how do I make it where he hears my voice?
Exactly. And I think that having somebody like Mia and seeing how she was treating other people and stuff, I think that kind of helped shape him. But also, like, he was being bullied. And I think a lot of people who can be like, wow, I'm being bullied, like, especially late elementary, early middle school, too, like, I'm being bullied. And so as a result, I'm hardened to other people. And I just felt like a lot of late elementary, early middle school students could relate to a lot of the different characters in the book that I like. I like that aspect.
Would you read this with your third graders?
Third graders, no. I would read it if I had taught fifth grade again. I have the book on my shelf actually that somebody had gotten me from the book fair, like a family
Mm-hmm.
had bought me from the book fair, and we have it in
Mm-hmm.
our school library. That's where I checked it out from to read it. Um, fifth grade, I think I would. I don't think that I would read it to third graders just because of and the scene that like pops out to me when I think about why I wouldn't read to my third graders is like what the one scene where like the drunk is banging on the
Mm-hmm.
door or the when the mom gets beat up by I just the couple of those parts I just don't think they're ready for.
Right.
Some yes and some no. But I think by fifth grade I would potentially, depending on my class,
Right.
use it as a read aloud.
Yeah, I thought it had some really awesome character traits in that
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
Like you said, the weeklies and the bonding and the family. And I thought it was really cool to see how, the process of these people coming in and knowing nobody and the struggles and then just being so welcomed by people. And then, the struggles that they went through and all that. It was a great, very different avenues you could go with your students
Hmm.
to help them to learn, respect. You could help them to learn work ethic. Just a lot of different really cool things that I thought were in there. But I also think, like you were saying, you had to be really careful also because there was some stuff that they were doing that was like legally not okay. And so
Right.
it's kind of that like, it's good you're helping, but at the same time, it's like legally not okay. Like you're really giving out free rooms and like
Right.
it's not really realistic. And so it's kind of going through those conversations. And I just agree with you. Like, I don't think that, like, I can tell you my fourth grader was kind of not, it was not appropriate in some areas. So it did require a whole lot of conversation, which I thought was really
Yes.
cool. That we were able to do that, but I can tell that it didn't register with her the way that it did with me.
Yeah.
So
I loved Mia so much. Like, talk about self-confidence. And
yes.
I love that, like, one of the things that I thought was funny is like the day they got to the motel and she met the Weeklies, like, Hank is immediately giving her a burger and she's like, yeah, I'm gonna eat burgers with you guys. Like, I just met you. So
Mm-hmm.
she's like the most confident kid. And the part where she wrote the letter to get the family friends like passport and papers back and it worked. I was so amazed. And then when I found out reading the author's input at the back of the book that she
Yeah.
did that as a kid and it worked, I was like doubly impressed that it was a
Mhm.
true story because not that many kids would be that self-confident or just try. Like what it amazed me is that Mia would at least just try, even if she wasn't sure that it was gonna work. Like she was one of the most like, um, just like, yeah, confident, but just like believes that it's worth giving it a shot in every situation.
And
Right.
and even going back, circling like how we started the discussion of people doing things that they might be made fun of for, but they do it anyways. Like she wasn't necessarily made fun of for enjoying writing, but her mom definitely was not a fan of it, and
Mm-hmm.
she continued to do it. And like that's like the confidence that you want all of your kids to, like when they're made fun of or when they're put down for being wanting to do something. And she wasn't good at it at first because her teacher, she said all those marks on her paper, but that she didn't stop. That didn't stop her from wanting to do it. And I think that's such a big thing that you could teach with your students about, like, people were like telling her absolutely not, like, why are you not liking this? And why are you not falling into this stereotype? And you're not even good at the other one. And like she continued to persevere and keep going, and she was good at it. Like, I mean, like just seeing like her letters, I liked seeing her like mistakes and where she did the work to correct it.
Yes.
Mhm.
I loved that they included her errors because,
Yes.
and I read it the first time when I'd read through that. I read it the first time, omitting what they had crossed out. And then I read it back through with her
Yep.
things that she hadn't. And I spent a lot of time doing it because, you have to train your brain to read it not correctly. But I was like, wow, like I really appreciated that
Me
was
too.
included in there,
Mhm.
And I mean, that could have also been another teachable moment in your classroom, of editing, which is a totally different thing, but you could totally use that to talk about editing and, reading it the wrong way and then how she still persevered through it and did it correctly. And I just thought it was a really, really cool story.
I think my battery might die and I don't have my charger with me. So I'm like, just make it a few more minutes, computer, just in case that happens.
Okay.
But the other thing that I loved was like how Mia was seeing her parents as real people.
Yeah.
Like they really could not hide their struggles from her. Um, but I like that she had like the maturity to see it for what it was, to see them as real people who were trying their best.
Yeah.
And then like I also really like that she had the closer bond with her dad, because that's not something that I think a lot of books depict is like, a girl and a dad having a closer bond than the girl and a mom. I feel like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of books focus on like the mother-daughter relationship or the father-son relationship. But I really liked that her dad was like her cheerleader. And when he took
Mm-hmm.
her and he bought her that $4.99 sparkly green pencil,
Mm-hmm.
that was like one of my favorite moments in the whole story.
And then it was
Yeah.
taken so
And then
fast
when
from her. I was
Jason licked
so
it,
mad.
I
And I
remember
did,
reading it about the part of him licking it. And I was like,
but I also
oh,
didn't really like the way the teacher handled that part either. I was like,
no.
she just said, "We'll snap it in half," and he was the only one to react. I'm like, not every student's initial reaction is to react. So like
Yes.
you literally didn't give her a second to react to it.
Yes. I
But
was
also
so
like
irritated.
yes.
I
Yeah.
know,
Oh,
I was like, Jason, I cannot believe
Well, and
that
two, I
you
was like,
licked
don't you
her.
know your students? Like at that point, I don't know what point of the year it was. Like I feel like it had been far enough. You know your students. You would know who would use a pencil. You know, maybe Jason's not, he just tries to act tough, and and it's like your students. You would know that by then who probably took it and who probably didn't based on their prior actions.
right.
Like,
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
Mia seem like the kind of kid that would not steal somebody else's pencil? Like,
Mm-hmm.
come on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or like, I know fifth graders, like, I think of everything as like the babies because I teach babies. I would just send both parents a message and be like, does
Yeah.
your
Yeah,
kid have a
yeah.
sparkly green pencil? Like,
Yeah.
come on.
One thing I also really loved about the story was the friendship that she was able to develop. And I thought it
Yes.
was really cool how, at first it was based on this lie and this portraying of this like perfect life. Like you have this perfect life and you have these wonderful clothes and you have this big house and everything you go home to. And then when it was able to come out that it wasn't that way, like I thought it was really a cool friendship that got to develop. And, you know, it just, again, you know how you were saying it went off the parents not portraying this false image. I loved it that they were able to bond on similar things and not go through the steps of pretending that they had this perfect life. Because I feel like we live in a world where everybody tries to pretend that we have this perfection. And so I really did appreciate that friendship that was built within that story as well.
Yes.
I loved the part where she realized that like Lupe
Mm-hmm.
cares about her and needs her as much as like she needs Lupe.
Yeah.
And like the idea that it didn't occur to her that Lupe would be sad if she
Yes,
moved
yes.
away.
Mm-hmm.
I loved that like realization in Mia when she was like, oh, like somebody could be sad to lose me as a friend. And I thought that was such an important moment for Mia to have.
I know.
And
Totally
I think
agree.
she was able to relate it to her leaving
Mhm.
cousin, and like she
Yeah.
referred back to her you know, I think she was able to like put two and two together, like, oh, this is a similar feeling.
Correct. Yeah. All right, ladies. Well, that wraps us up. So, any last comments?
No?
My computer didn't die.
Yay! All right. Well, thank you, girls. I hope you have a wonderful next 2 days, and then it's the weekend. So,
Yes, and we can stay in touch about our schedules for next week.